Welcome to the Behind the Art Inspiration podcast, a sneak peek into the studio practices of all types of artists, conversations for artists and fans of art who are sophisticated and savvy. I'm your host, Caroline Karp. Let's get to it. Well, hello, everyone. This is episode number 16 of the Behind the Art Inspiration podcast. In this episode, I'll be virtually traveling from my Safety Harbor, Florida studio across the Atlantic Ocean and into the studio of artist Christy de Witt. Christy de Witt, also known as Ms. Witty, is a visual artist and art poet who basically creates modern fables. Her witty art is where cartoon and pop meet surrealism and expressionism. In her work, she explores universal human themes using bizarre, animalistic, cartoonesque, fable-like creatures to visualize them. She's based in Rotterdam, the Netherlands. And so, how are you doing today, Christy?
I'm fine, Caroline. Thank you for having me over virtually. Welcome in my studio. And I'm fine.
And we were just having this really long, in-depth discussion of things that were so amazing, and I want to bring them here live. I think the first thing I want to talk about is where you are. Like, where are you in the world? Because I'm in the United States, in Florida, and you are not. So tell us about where you are first.
I'm not. Well, I think most people might be familiar with the name of Amsterdam, which is the capital of the Netherlands. That rings a bell a lot. We're Rotterdam. We're the second largest city in the Netherlands. The port of Rotterdam is quite world famous. And for those who are not geographically very familiar with where the Netherlands are, we're that tiny little bit of country in the top of Europe, opposite the United Kingdom, and that's where you find me.
And another thing that we were talking about was your artwork. And what I read in the description was cartoonesque characters, but they're also linked with not human design, but human emotions and different archetypes, probably. Can you talk a little bit about your characters that you designed?
Correct. I think I was influenced at a very young age by cartoon movies, Walt Disney to begin with, and not the very known work, but I was grasped by Fantasia, the movie featuring Mickey Mouse and everything. But I was and Fables. Fables in which you have these animalistic creatures that are still very human. And I think the actual work, and I actually lost the word, anthropomorphic. That's the word I was looking for. Anthropomorphic creatures. There's a whole history in the arts and in fables and in books, children books, for instance, where you have anthropomorphic characters that are little animals, but they have human traits. And I always found it very appealing, very easy to use animalistic characters to convey human emotions. Whereas I think if I would depict, if I would have actual human figurines in my work, human figures, it would be very confrontational. It would become darker than I would like it to be. And to use these fable-like characters, there is a certain lightness to it, but it still has the depth of what I want to share, what I want to create. So it's I do not draw humans, but I actually can. I have a traditional background as a painter. I have a lot of experience in painting models, human models, but I like to embody all these human emotions, all the human traits, all these characteristics of being a human into these anthropomorphic characters, like a little mouse bears, etc., etc., rabbits, etc. And it's very look at Alice in Wonderland.
Yes.
Down the rabbit hole.
Can you talk about the writing that becomes part of your artwork?
Yes. There's always written text in my artwork. From a young age. I'm actually a failed songwriter. That's how I describe myself often a lot. I'm actually a failed songwriter. I would have liked to be a singer-songwriter, but I have no musical feeling or whatsoever. But I can write. I've always loved to write. And as I was writing what I thought, to be songs, they actually evolved into poems. And once I started adding the words to my work, to my visual artwork, something very interesting happened. It was like a different extra layer, extra depth came with it. And I think the connection nowadays is so strong that if I see they're not finished until they have their, I always say it's more than a title. Without the words, the work isn't finished. The words provide an extra layer, they provide depth, they provide meaning, sometimes even counteracting what is being depicted, sometimes reinforcing it, sometimes there appears to be no connection whatsoever, but there still is a connection. And so yeah, I think I tend to call myself an art poet as well as a visual artist. I think that connects very well together. And again, a lot of the inspiration for that comes from cartoons, graphic novels. There's a very rich history of graphic novels and cartoon books, comic books, where text and written words are all important in there to tell the story, to help move the story in tune with the drawings. And I'm very influenced by that, and I can see definitely me working to explore it even further, to see how far can you go with text and drawings, and basically to tell a story.
Can you show us?
Of course.
Seem to have an
Well, I'll try not to move too much.
I don't think it's you. I think it's me somehow. That's okay.
Well, here is, for instance, one.
And will you read that to us in case people can't see it very well?
Because it's also, I think, in a mirror, you know?
Right.
Can you hear the sounds coming from below? And it's, for instance, this one.
And are you referring to below the surface of the earth? I'm just curious.
Yeah, or more like, you know, the whole subcurrent, subconscious, or the subcurrent of emotions is when, you know, when you're having a conversation with somebody and you are talking to each other about something very trivial, you know, the weather, your work, how you've been, and yet you feel there is this subcurrent, this undertow of things that are not being said. There's a very beautiful citation by poet Keats, I think, or Keats. I'm not sure how to pronounce that one. And that is, heard melodies are sweet, but those unheard are sweeter. And I read that poem, I think the name was Ode to a Grecian Urn, but I read that poem a long time ago. But that very first sentence just stuck into my head, and it never left me. I think it's so powerful that what is said is one thing, but that isn't being said is just as powerful a statement. And I think you can see that, if I may show some other stuff. For instance, where are you? You can see this one is, for instance, called, or all that talk of opportunities. And you can see this one.
So that is That is one of your most prevalent guys that I see in your artwork.
Yeah.
So what is he? What is he, and what does he represent, if you know? Yeah.
Well, this character goes by the name of Lost Bear, and I came up with that character about 5 years ago when I literally got lost, because I lost at the time. That was the time I lost everything. I lost my house, my home, my studio, everything, and it was the beginning of I think a year of being homeless and staying everywhere and nowhere, so to put it. And in that time, this character just popped to me as this a bear is this character that is very ferocious, as nature. In nature,
Right.
It's a very ferocious character. Yeah, it's very cuddly. There's this whole tradition and this whole visual tradition of cuddly bears, of toy bears, you name it. You got it. You got bears everywhere. There's Winnie the Pooh, who is the most lovable, likable little bear ever. And I think I like that because it's very appealing. Yet at the same time, for me, I used it as a way, this character, to convey my emotions at the time, which were about getting lost, literally getting lost. And the funny thing was, once you get more grounded, you get back to earth, you rebuild your life, everything. The character stayed with me, and I found it a very powerful character to keep on exploring this feeling of being lost. Because I think we live in a society where so many people are incredibly lost. They don't know where to belong. And whereas, you have people, you have careers, people are successful, but they are lost a lot of times because they don't live their full potential. They don't live the life that they actually want to live. And then there is a lot of people that are actually lost because they're being pushed out of society because for not being so-called successful, for literally being lost. And then there's a lot of other people who are literally lost because they are adrift, literally adrift, refugees, homeless people. So I found this character. He's got several manifestations, but it's always a little bear. To be very, especially because in children's books you see this, and in other books and in comic books you see this bear is always very cuddly. But this is not a very cuddly. Well, he is still cuddly, or she. They are still very cuddly, but they're not cuddly at first sight. And that's what I find very interesting, to go beyond the surface, to go beyond what is at first sight, not to go for that first impression, but to always go for the second or maybe even the third impression. Again, it's what is the undertow, the subcurrent, that what's not being said is more interesting than what you see at face value. That's why this little guy, including with a whole lot of other bunch of characters, it's a world that gets populated more and more with little lost characters that are still clinging on to each other in a way to survive.
So I'm broadcasting from my home studio, and there's a buzzing sound outside. So as I go and shut that door so we don't hear it, can you talk a little bit about the power of narrative? We were talking about that before we went live. And I'll be right back.
Okay. Well, the power of narrative is, to make it people always tell me, they've been telling me for years, why don't you write a book? I mean, I'm obviously somebody who likes to write, and I create images. So why don't you write a book? And I've been thinking about that for years. And the thing is, I'm not very interested in the traditional narrative. And the traditional narrative of a book is where you have a beginning, and you have a main character, and there's an opposing character, and there's a storyline, there's a middle, and there's an ending. That's what you're being taught when you're young, when you learn to write stories. I'm not very interested in that. I'm interested in see if I can find a narrative, because yes, I am exploring all possibilities of creating a book. But I'm interested in exploring the possibilities of a different narrative, a non-chronological narrative, or how do you say it? In theater, you have this form, this technique they call breaking down the fourth wall, where the person on stage or in a movie directly addresses the audiences. Well, it's what I find very, very fascinating techniques to disturb a little bit, to deregulate what is actually, the actual narrative. I like a little bit of disturbance and deregulation. And you see it in movies, you see it in films. For instance, the work of David Lynch. He's a director that plays a lot with that, to break down the narrative. There is a film featuring Guy Pearce's Memento, where the story is completely told backwards because it's about a guy who has short-term memory loss. Film techniques are very interesting to try to incorporate in a book, which is not, hey, maybe I should go make a movie. It's another idea. But yeah, I'm interested in exploring non-chronological, non-standard narratives in my work, and as we speak, in a book that I'm trying to get together, so to speak.
So a lot of your work also, I see the characters have a desire to connect, which is human nature, and I see that theme with children all the way up through adults. Do you have a piece of work you could show us?
Yeah, well, I think this is very, very, okay, this is quite a heavy one. Well, why not show it? This is one where you see two figurines obviously dying to connect. And the title is, above it says, "Not yet worthy." Mm. And underneath it says, "It never will be." And that is, I think, I will keep it in.
So which one is saying which, do you know?
Well, that's the good thing. That right. Is something for, yeah, that's the interesting question that changes. It's always something for the viewer to fill in who says what, or is it a third person?
I mean, is it a status thing? Is it a status connection where they're not feeling quite at the same level in status? Is one feeling up? Is one feeling down?
Well, there is, when you talk about what I'm always very fascinating with, what I spoke about just before was about, people being left out of society, being pushed out, and people wanting in, is, insiders versus outsiders. You see that everywhere. You see that in kindergarten. You see that in society. You see that you see it everywhere. And I think that's a very powerful theme in my work. It's always a bit, those who are in and those who are out. And you can see it. There's another thing. Oh, let me look. Oh, here's another one. This is a very recent one. Here is another one.
Oh, there's that guy I like.
Oh, it's a cute one. Yeah. What do you need to see me through? Well, there's a question in the air about, okay, where there's some kind of connection going on, and we are trying to get somewhere, but what do you need to see me through? What do you need? What can we give each other to help each other through? And there is, that's what I find very interesting. The question of who says what is also that's strongly connected to narrative. Is it, as I said, is it this person talking to the other, or is it a third person talking about them? And And that's, I think, I like to really in my work it's a thin line into between how much you give away. That's something that you should that every artist should relate to. How much do you give away of what you want to convey, and how much space is there for the viewer to make, and there it is again, to make their personal connection with the artwork. Because
so that must make social media quite fun for you, because it's sort of that, the viewer sees the image, they might see the text, and then they're going to, in your comments, they might insert their own little play with words or
it is. It definitely is.
Yeah. So like I find myself doing that. Like I have pretty much no idea really what you're thinking about. I kind of know, but then I'm going to look at it through my lens of how I see things. And so that's when I'll just shoot back either a title for it or just the first thing. It's usually the first thing that pops in my mind. But then you come right back with something. So it makes it it's engaging. It then engages the audience.
Yeah. Yeah. It's actually something that also happens when I have my work on display, for instance, at an exhibition. The same thing happens. You have people, and they ask me, because I'm present, of course, and they ask me these very direct questions. And I'm a little bit evasive, because I want to invite them to connect with the work, to give a little bit of themselves in relation to what is being displayed. And then you've got so many interesting conversations, genuine conversations, hilarious conversations. It's the equivalent of what happens indeed when I post a work and I ask for thoughts on my Instagram. I post it and I ask thoughts, or even ask people to come up with titles. It's actually very interesting, because it's also a way to connect with your audience. It's also a way to find out what makes people tick and how they perceive your work. It's a very powerful, lighthearted way of, and also how people react to certain titles. It's in the combination of the work of the title is, people sometimes go like, oh wow, that's heavy, and others are just rolling over the floor laughing. The reactions are very, 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 very different. So that makes it a lot of fun.
So there are some of these, especially the little bear. Sometimes he can have one eye or two eyes, I think, but then also his eyes will be gone, and there might be lines. Do you know which art I'm talking about?
Yeah.
You don't want to give a little tidbit on what that's all about, do you?
Well, that's about seeing or not being able to see. Is like there's a lot of things in life that we see when we walk through the world, and there's a lot of things that you see. There's so many things unseen, and also, and maybe that's one thing. That's very very broad interpretation of how the lens through which you look at life. And the other interpretation is actually there's a primal fear that when you're an artist, the worst thing that they can do is it happens to you is that your vision gets taken away from you, or your voice, you're a singer, your voice gets stripped away from you, or when your hands, something happens to your hands. So that's quite a primal fear in within me, and sometimes I even have dreams about that. And it's also to be connected at that moment when you feel you are losing everything and you feel like you're shouting for help. And I think that is, I think everyone goes through a stage in his or her or their life that you go through that and experience that feeling of being so powerless. You want to shout for help, or you shout for help, but nobody seems to hear you. And that's a feeling that, the eyes being taken away, or the being blinded, or often I think there's another one that they have. Hands or no hands. This one is basically
I love the one with the ballerina, like the one that I said looks like ballerinas.
There's a lot of ballerinas, I think. Yeah, I think, I do not have it here, but here's another one, for instance. This is completely different. I've been absorbed by birds of late.
Yeah.
And that's yeah. Oh, them darker days upon the rooftops. I also lyrics and songs, films, documentaries, etc., are very, very, very fruitful grounds for titles and pieces of texts in combination with my own. So,
absolutely, I can find the same thing happening in my work where I'll be listening to music and either the title happens from that or elements in the artwork will happen from that too. So I understand what you're talking about. Yeah. Where can people find out more about your artwork?
Well, on Instagram, it's the what's that in English? The
ampersands? I don't remember. It's the at sign. The at sign.
Yeah, of course, at. Okay, at Miss Witty, and that's MIZZWITTY. And on Facebook, it's Art by Christy de Witt. And I'm working on a new website, www.artbychristydewitt.nl, but that's not online yet. It's going to take a little while. But yeah, just look me up at social media and react to one of my works, think of a new title, and I'll react. I'll always opt for conversation. I like conversation.
Yeah, I think that's going to be really fun for people to actually go in and see actually what we're talking about and become part of the conversation.
Yeah.
And want to know more. So don't go anywhere, Christy. I'm going to say goodbye to everyone, but don't go anywhere.
Yeah.
I want to thank you so much for being here and thank everyone for watching and listening as I share. In March of 2020, we're almost at our year anniversary. Oh my gosh, would that be tomorrow? Might be. In March of 2020, I had a vision of starting the International Online Art Collective, which is a diverse group of artists from around the world who value power, the power of art to inspire, provoke, and heal. The power of this group is in connection. And from this, a podcast is born. First interviewing the artists that were part of this group or currently part of this group, and then branching out to all types of artists. I just want to mention here that last Saturday, I had my very own virtual art exhibition. It was called, it's still going on, but it's called Sails, Souls, and Sparkles. And it's my artwork from the entire year of 2020 in my sailboats. And the link is live, and so people can go and actually click in the link. It's in my bio, and they have the ability to click on the painting, navigate the gallery themselves, but they can click on the painting and then actually read about and listen to what I was thinking when I was creating that artwork. But anyways, just wanted to let everybody know that. And once again, Christy, thank you so much for being here. Is there anything else you want to tell us before we go off live?
I hope everybody stays sane and safe amidst the crazy things going on in the world. And thank you for having me on the show, Caroline. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to end this and I'll be right back.